From Ticker Studios, this is The Connector, presented by Harper. The
global workplace is shifting fast as companies rethink how people come together, create and collaborate. I'm Belinda and The Connector starts now. And to unpack the future of work and global workplace trends, I'm joined by Amanda Stanaway, a global thought leader and workplace strategist. And actually, I'm really excited that you're in Australia, let alone visiting me in Melbourne, because you do spend a lot of time travelling the world.
It's great to be here.
And for 3 decades, actually, you've worked across cities around the world. What workplace trends are you seeing take hold most rapidly in 2026?
I think you have to say it's flexibility, and I say that and a lot of people go, oh.
We've been hearing that for a long time.
But
yeah.
I think really if you think about the headwinds that are happening in business, we've actually just got through hybrid work, and we've actually understood that and started to design through that. And then we've got this AI, the AI piece that's coming in, actually disrupting how workforces are formed. We're starting to think about how the human and the machine works together and what that means for a workplace. And last but not least, we've got the global political pieces that are coming in play. And actually, as we look through the fuel crisis, we're really worrying what's going to happen. Are we going to actually go back to home? And so really, as we start to work with any client, we absolutely 100% the number one trend is actually how do we have flexibility and an agility to respond to change, because none of us can strongly predict it. What we're seeing most is that optimization as well as experience come together, and some of the biggest companies in the world are really doubling down on making sure people are together, but ultimately recognizing that we still need flexibility.
So when we're thinking about bringing people together, which I suppose has been the best outcome of the hybrid workplace, is allowing people to have the flexibility to work from home as they need, but come together in really special ways. And that's where there's been a trend that they're calling hotelization on hospitality grade workplaces to create those spaces. So can you explain that to us?
Yeah, that trend's been around for a little while, but really, I think you think about it in 2 ways. You think about it from a design perspective, so the aesthetics of space. So we like softer spaces. We want to move away from corporatization because we all got really used to home. We all like a hotel, and so there's something special about that. But more importantly, I'd say the operations of space. So a hotel has great service. It predicts, it works with you, not against you. And I think the workplace has never really done that. We've never customized, we never personalized, we've never made it respond to us. So the reason hotelization is actually a massive trend is we want more personalization in the spaces we create, and ideally we want them to be much softer. And so these 2 things come together, so the design and the operations, to make them much better. Macquarie did this really well. They actually started this in about 2009. They brought Accor in to operate their commercial properties. And I think you've seen...
So they brought a hotel brand into a corporate workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. And they continue to do that. And I think lots of people are following that trend or talk about it. But I think the one thing that we have to do is invest in service. That means also investing in data and the ability to predict that when you might come in, you might want a certain type of experience. And I think we're sometimes a little scared about that.
Like the pillow menu in the hotel?
Absolutely, or just that I know that you like a skin flat white or whatever that is. And I think really importantly, we've been scared of taking that data in the workplace, but we're really happy to give it away in most other parts of our life. So I think it really is an opportunity for us to make much more tailored responses rather than one size fits all.
With the hotelisation, one of the things that moved away with the hybrid workplace is people started to move off their receptionists and having a electronic logging in. So will we bring back the hotel welcome to workplaces by having receptionists again, do you think?
Yeah, if you go back to the very first trend of the idea of what is the human great at and what is the machine great at, the human experience is actually going to be amplified in the next generation of work. I believe that fully, because ultimately you always, with everything, have to have an analogue and a digital. And so ultimately we have to double down on the great experiences and the moments that matter and why we create impact. So I believe wholly that they'll always sit in tandem, the same way as you check in on Qantas. You can either use the machine or you can actually go to the desk, and ultimately there's always choice. And I think choice is important, but a human touch, come on, I think we can use the machine to make the human smarter rather than just use the machine. That's my view.
So you've been quite lucky in being able to get to know the Google workplaces globally, and I know there's probably a lot of things you can't share with us, but to the world we always know Google as being beanbags and slides and running tracks and crazy fun things like that. But there's a real differentiator behind the scenes at Google, and maybe you can talk to us a little bit about their food strategy.
I think it's one of the most interesting strategic changes that anyone has made. And I think if you know the background, Larry Page said people that eat together create together. If you're a good Italian family, you understand that there's a thing called kitchen table wisdom. And I think they use that strategically to build out their workplace. Like Google is one of the best workplaces in the world. It's also the most incentivized workforce. So I think the interesting thing about that, food was used to create strategy and to create ideas. And ultimately, unfortunately, 20 years down the track, some people don't know that, but if you watch Sundar present recently, so the CEO, he actually went back to Charlie's, their first cafe, and said these places have significance. So I think it's really easy to look at a workplace and think it's fun and tricky, or even that something is a benefit or an incentive. The reality is what everyone's trying to do is bring people together, build relationship and build trust, but also more importantly, also come up with ideas. And I think we all know that we solve problems when we sit down and break bread. And so ultimately using that at scale in one of the biggest workforces in the world is fundamentally interesting. And I think people ask me all the time, is it a benefit? And I think it's a strategic advantage. And they do that better than anyone.
Well, I like to think that we come to the workplace to feel well, and having access to a chef or really great food, snacks and things like that, it's always going to be a little bit better than at home, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Anything we don't have to cook ourselves as well. How is AI changing workplace design, and how is it changing employees' expectations?
Look, I think really workplace design hasn't really we haven't tapped into the way that we use data or data analytics well enough. For me, really, it's going to change the way we can predict what is good, what is bad, how a portfolio is performing, but also help it make it more human. And so we haven't used it dramatically yet. I think across lots of things like building management and temperature, hygiene factors, we've used it, but ultimately, how does it become better at predicting experience? And for me, really building out experience by having much better AI in a workplace is kind of the aim. Because really, what happened, we've normalised to, I'm going to say, one size fits all. And what most people want and where the best experience exists is when we can tailor them. And so ultimately, automation and a number of different things will allow us to do that much better than we do right now.
Well, are you seeing anything that's working really well? Because I do hear a lot of conversations about AI helping businesses work out where to put people and what floors that they should work on, because it's connecting, it's understanding who they're talking to and when.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a number of different automation tools that actually can do that by putting in a set of preferences, saying I want to sit near you, I want to be near you. And I think if you go back to all the parts of the conversation we've had to date, whether it's Google and food, or even the beginning when we were talking about how bringing people together is important, co-location of people that actually can come together to solve a problem, whether that be cross-disciplinary or actually within the same team, is really fundamental. So I would say openly, using AI to help do that and actually bring people together, and actually understanding who needs to know who, or who could create serendipity with each other, I think is really exciting, but I can understand why people think it's terrifying in the same sense.
All right, so you've talked about workplace as an ecosystem. What does that mean for cities like Sydney and London?
I think when you think about work, how people think about it is about people, place, and also like the environment, and then an overlay of technology. I think what happens when someone's building out a workplace is they often don't consider the holistic impact of it. So particularly as we start to look at amenity-rich cities, and I say that because every developer and every tenant is looking for third space or shared amenity. Yet if we don't think about it as a whole ecosystem, or the city as a whole ecosystem, you end up with all of these things that are duplicated in building across building. That's not bad, but I think ultimately if we had a much more broad view of a city, so Sydney or London, how do we bring people together, and actually how do we work across broader spaces than just a fit out or a building, then start to think about citywide.
And people who aren't used to the term, what is a third space?
A third space is a space that a number of tenants or a number of organisations share, that they come together. They usually pay for that in some way, shape or form, whether that is amortised into their rent or if they're paying by use. But I think about it as a Qantas club for work as part of a building. And I think very much so we have been continuing to use that to actually go through the ups and downs of workplace. So most of us can't predict what size a workforce is going to be in 5 years from now. So the third spaces start to actually create serendipity. And I think the one thing we'd say for sure is post-COVID, we are trying to drive community. We lost community. Lots of people lost a lot of connection. So in all the work that we're doing, we're trying to drive human connection.
So many companies are chasing creativity as well as human connection. What spaces are genuinely driving the better thinking? Other than the slides and the beanbags, of course.
I think it's really hard to answer that because I don't think it's particularly just spatial. It's actually a deliberate behavioural change. I think we say collaboration all the time, so I could easily say collaboration spaces, but almost every organisation that we work with doesn't actually understand what the deliberate tactic of collaboration is. It's different to meeting. The aim is actually to come together and come our way with an outcome. So ultimately, the best spaces are ones that actually create outcome, whether that are better connections between people or product. So look, I could easily say, fit for purpose, but also like you'll see things like maker spaces or, any of those spaces that seem a little quirky, but they may actually have a distinct purpose that drives an outcome. And for me, really trying to find ways that people connect is fundamental to the work that we do.
Last question for you. If you could redesign one iconic workplace, what would you change?
Dear. I think that the workplace I'd love to go back to is Lloyd's of London because I think it was so iconic to the way that we work, but also understanding how to make it human scale because I think it was rather large. And I think there's a couple of workplaces that have been created over the last probably 5 years that the human nature of it, everyone says they design human first, but actually they sometimes design a great gesture where the human's not at the centre of the experience. So I'd say I'd love to go back to Lloyd's of London just because it's iconic and it reminds me of my great days in London. But I think certainly changing the connection.
Thank you so much for coming in. It's been amazing to have you and it's great to have you in Australia.
Thank you.
You're watching Ticker. The Connector is presented by Harper B. For more, visit harperb.com.au.